listening to Flaunt. Find your sparkle and create a life you love after infidelity or betrayal. A podcast for women who've been betrayed by their intimate partner and want to turn their devastation into an invitation to reclaim themselves and their worth. Tune in weekly so you can start making sense of it all and learn how to be okay on the inside, no matter what goes on the outside. Download your free Betrayal Recovery Toolkit at betrayalrecoveryguide.com.
Last week, we talked about hope after betrayal, how hope becomes the bridge between devastation and who you are becoming. Today, I want to put some legs on that hope. If you have ever asked yourself, who do I need? Who do I need to reach out to? Do I need a therapist? Do I need a counselor? Do I need a coach? Do I need a sexologist? And what do those things even mean? Or if you've ever asked yourself, is this an addiction? Like, does my partner have a bona fide addiction? Or did he just make a really big mistake? Was this just a really bad decision? Is he a narcissist or an addict? Then this episode is going to bring clarity and calm. My guest today is Cheryl Camarillo, a social worker and sexologist with 30 years of experience working in sex addiction, betrayal trauma, and couples who are deciding whether and how to rebuild. We talk about 3 ideas that can impact and change your path forward. We talk about integrity abuse, why broken promises hurt like trauma, and what accountability really looks like. We talk about entitlement versus empathy, the mindset shift required in the partner who acted out. And we talk about the difference between addiction and acting out, both how to tell the difference and how to choose appropriate support. As always, I'll ground this into the reality of your nervous system, because you are not too much for struggling. You are not broken. You are a human being whose world has been shaken. So if hope felt fragile last week, today we are going to give it a little bit of structure, a little bit of language, some steps, and some options, because Cheryl is one of those people who has got very calming and grounding energy. A quick note, however, I am going to be jumping right in to the middle of my conversation with Cheryl, because when we recorded it, we spent quite a bit of time going through some of the academia of things. And I wanted you to get in right where the insights started flowing, because I want this episode to help you exhale, to find some clarity and find some peace. And as a reminder, if you haven't already done so, please download your free Betrayal Recovery Guide at betrayalrecoveryguide.com. So that way you can have some tools right there at your fingertips to start feeling better fast. Let's start from the beginning. What is it that you do?
My latest adventure happens to be working in sex addiction and betrayal trauma. And in addition to that, working on reunification of couples that, are interested in that, if the dynamic's right and the safety's there. And then the other piece is the returning back to a sex life for those couples, because that's a very difficult path to set back up in order to, it has to be under a lot of safety and trust, and there needs to be this sense of empathy, a good connection and a flow and passion. So
yeah. I'm glad that you were underpinning safety with all of this, because both in reunification and in having sex again, it's so important to have that foundation of safety. And I know a lot of the people that I work with have the idea. Initially, they switch, but initially it's like, if I could just get back to how it was, everything would be okay. If I just didn't know that this has happened, everything would be okay. And that's not really it.
No, there's a Dr. Omar Minwala that has a lot of information online, but he says once you have that secret sexual basement, all the secrets of the partner, and you have the person that has the experience of discovering that, when it intersects, you will never be the same again. Pre-existing reality is now that's pre-existing. It's not there. You have a new reality with the discovery, and then you'll, if the work is happening from both sides, then the next level would be the relationship in a different place. So here and here, never, that's gone. So
Right. Right. Yeah, it's definitely a jarring reality. And no, it is a new path forward. And while that new path forward can be really good and really powerful, it takes a lot of work to get there. And I'd love for you to talk a little bit about what does that work look like? How do you start that reconciliation process? How do we even know early on if reconciliation is possible?
Um, it, the biggest tell is, do both people enter with the same intention? And if there's still blaming going on by the partner that acted out, there's really not too much that can be done. It's still very unsafe for the partner, and it's going to be causing more damage. But if both partners come in and they are willing to look at the situation and do their healing in their own ways, in their own areas, then you have a chance to move into a later piece of the later piece of the relationship where there's resiliency, and it's a better than we were before situation. So there's this assessment piece, like what do we have going on here? And then you have this stabilizing piece, like how do we get this, how does the person that acted out get himself resituated or herself? And how does the person that's been betrayed get themselves situated and also feel like their partner is doing the work that they need to? And then they meet at the top where they're able to look at everything together and say, we're just going to keep looking at this for a little while longer as we start to get to know each other in the new way. And then kind of from there, then you're going down, learning everything you can about how to have a successful, happy relationship. And then the end part is we've grown, we're flourishing, and everything feels good to both parties. The trauma that started is now the trauma that gave the gift of healing.
Yeah. Yeah. You said early on that the very first thing to do is kind of assess and figure out where we're at, what's going on. I want to talk a little bit more about that because so often people have D-Day. They discover something is going on and they think it's one thing, but that it ends up being a series of things. It's not just an affair. Maybe there's some addiction. Maybe there's a chemical dependency. Maybe there's this, maybe there's that. I'd love for you to talk a little bit about what does this assessment phase mean and where is, I guess, the defining moment of, is this really a thing or is it just behavior that somebody has moved into? When is it clinical? When is it acting out? Say more about all of that assessment because I know that gets confusing for people as well.
Sure. I think when it comes to the person that acted out, we're looking for, is there any underlying mental health issues? Is there any underlying, psychological issues, emotional issues, relationship issues from their past? Then we actually go back and we look at what did they get exposed to from 0 to 18? Where did their sexual acting out maybe first show up in their lives? Because I'm going to be honest, so many people, a large segment of people get their first exposures in their teens or preteen years. And it's that distorted beginning reality of what sexuality is about that just plays itself all the way through and makes it a situation where when you're discovering these things about your partner, there's this sense of entitlement of this is just the way it is. Okay. I can remember when my husband, when I found out that my husband was using pornography, I used the statement, well, that's just what men do.
Right.
Well, my line was, he didn't care where he was watching it. And it ended up being in a place where my daughter happened to be walking by, and that's my line. She's not going to be exposed to that kind of stuff. And she asked me, what is that about? And I was like, well, it ain't going to be about that anymore. So I asked him for a separation. And, ultimately always protect your children.
Yeah.
And then, of course, protect yourself, but you do what you need to. That was my turning point, and that's how I ended up being in this field, was watching my husband just be inactive and not knowing where was I supposed to ask him to go, what was he supposed to be doing, had no idea. And so I just started this long journey, and now this is what I make my living from, because I really believe that people can either heal or they can get better and move on to maybe a healthier relationship down the line. If this isn't the right one, it's not the right one. I get that question sometimes. If you have to question, why should I start? If it's the partner that's acted out, why should I start doing anything? She's going to leave me anyway. It's kind of like, well, then yeah, you're right. She's going to leave you because you're not doing it for the right reasons. So,
Right. Yeah. Distorted reality, the whole distorted path. I can appreciate that so much. I'm still with my husband. He has done a lot of work, but yeah, the awareness that he had to go through, that, whoa, what the way he lived, that's not normal. And that was its own destabilizing reality shift that he had to go through. Wait, what? This, and it'd be like, no, that's not normal. That's your reality, not mine. And I liked how you had said something about like where the couple then can look at all of it together, because yes, I have to look at his past. He has to look at my past. We have to look at each other's reality and find acceptance in that in order to move forward together. And, a lot of my clients will say to me, like, I don't know if I can get over it. And you know what? That's fair too. If there's certain things where you're like, I just don't ever want to deal with that again. Possibly the safety could be there, but I don't want to deal with it. You don't have to.
Right. It's ultimately the partner's decision what she wants to do or not do. That's the biggest deciding factor in whether the relationship is going to go forward. And I know a lot of women come in and they don't feel like they're empowered. They feel like the power and control was in the hands of their partner, and that, they don't have choices, but they have lots of choices. So my job is to help make sure that women figure out how to grow themselves, so that they're feeling empowered, they feel stronger, they can request safety, they have expectations, and that it's not too high to say, I don't like this particular behavior and it needs to stop. And, that's a big struggle. It's very, very scary and feels unsafe. But, if you want to continue the relationship, it's something that has to be done. So.
It is a big struggle. I think especially women, we have been conditioned to keep the peace, to not rock the boat, to not be emotional, to not. And it is both empowering and terrifying. I think when we first start saying, and no, this is my boundary, and no.
Yeah, exactly. I think my job usually, and this is my favorite line, and a lot of the women really appreciate it, when they start getting stronger and they look like they could run their life without somebody else being involved. That's usually what gives their partner the kick in the pants to start moving a lot faster. And I certainly have men that come in and say, she's so far ahead of me. And I'm like, good, because, she's been so far behind you.
Yeah. And that's empowering. That's, Okay, so we diagnose, we figure out who's got what going on. We kind of come to terms, we create some of that safety. Then how does that treatment look, especially around some of the sexual acting out, the addictive behavior? Because it is up to, just for simplicity's sake, the man. It's up to him to deal with his issues while she deals with her issues. But what does that look like? Because sometimes there's that balance of how can I support you in getting healthy, but not own your therapy, not be codependent, but being supportive.
Right. So there's like three components going on when a person finds their partner has been cheating. The first is the actual sexual acting out. So that behavior. The second is the entitlement. It's the mentality of I get to do what I want when I want. It's no biggie. They'll say all kinds of things. And then the third piece is the part that impacts the partner, which is integrity abuse. Like your word doesn't mean anything. You joined this relationship and, and entered a contract saying always and forever, and that there would be trust and honesty and truth and all of that. And it didn't happen. And what the partner, the person that acted out does is they just don't see how that's such a big deal on this person. But it is. It causes a level of trauma. And a lot of cases, it's post-traumatic stress. Like it becomes actually something bigger. And for, relationships specifically with betrayal, it's usually relabeled betrayal trauma. But it is seriously post-traumatic stress. And people know what that is. It's you've been traumatized by something huge. And again, your life before, no longer the same.
No, it's not the same at all. And some of that just coming to terms with that, just being like, and I don't want to say it's okay, but it has happened. We do have to move on. We can't go back to before.
Right. So when I talk about the men working on their behavior and working on their entitlement, learning to say, okay, I can't be all about me. They need to learn to be empathetic. What's going on in this side is they have to start doing things like a lot of them find that going to Sex Addiction Anonymous or Sex and Porn Addiction Anonymous or finding a sponsor might be the thing. Everybody's different, but that might be their thing. And then getting a sponsor might be their thing. But ultimately, these guys need a community because they start into therapy thinking, I'm so ashamed. I feel so guilty. How could I have done this to my partner? They might have actually started and stopped and restarted. They could have repeatedly caused problems 3-4 times. A lot of the people I see, they've been through multiple therapists until, before they show up at my door looking for someone that specializes in this. And if you don't get a specialist, that has its own negative impact for a lot of couples, and especially for the partner, because there can be more abusiveness in attitude that comes across, not intentional, but this accidental, you're just making a big deal here. Or, you need to cut him some slack, or family members saying, just forgive him. It'll be okay. He promises. And that's the thing, the entitlement piece says, yes, I promise. But then I don't promise. Like they go up and down, and it's a true addiction. It's a brain hijacking. They have a neural pathway that says, I need dopamine, I need pleasure, I need adrenaline rush, I need fantasy, whatever's going on with them. That's what's driving the behavior. And so they need to have some kind of set pattern of changing that so that they're not stuck in that anymore. So a lot of them have to form, some kind of structure for themselves in order to just stay on track. And
I'm glad you're saying that, because oftentimes, I started the show saying like social work, psychologists, psychotherapists, like people don't know who does what and what they need. And sometimes I'll hear somebody be like, well, my husband saw a therapist. That doesn't do it, or we read the book. Great. And it's so much deeper than that. And I think sometimes people do get lost in what kind of a professional do I need? And what does it really even mean to get help? And what do you mean by a new neural pathway? And what do you mean by a support group? Can't I just fix this and move on? And I'd love for you to share your thoughts on, we don't just fix it and move on. And it's also not something that, okay, for the rest of my life, every single week, I have to work this hard. Can you talk a little bit more about that arc of recovery and what that looks like and how it's more intense, and then where it eases off, but where it doesn't ease off, and just that whole addictive brain patterning?
Yeah. So I guess I'll just kind of like run a case, where I have somebody that came in, they're I'm therapist number 3. They have several kids. They've been married, 20 years. She totally had, thought that he had kicked this pornography thing that he said he'd taken care of. He'd had some other multiple addictions like alcohol and shopping and stuff like that. So that multiple addiction piece, but because he'd taken care of his 12-step AA stuff and took care, he knew the process of what it takes to be committed to treatment or to a treatment plan or sobriety plan, actually, because he understood that it was so much easier when he came in. It became an issue of trying to help empower the partner. But, I'm sorry, another part of the question. What was
no, just for the addicted partner,
yeah,
for what can they, because so often people will just say in the spur of the moment, I'll get help, I'll go figure it out.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
what does that really mean? Because what are they really looking at?
Yeah, so it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
Some of them will say, I'll never do it again. Some of them will say, if only you would have, and they put the blame back on their partner. Other people will come in and say, if only you would have helped him in this way. So basically, it's about the person that's acted out. They need to learn to take accountability for their behavior, that they're not blaming other people, that they're no longer using all the tricks and trades of trying to keep their secret, because they've been practicing that kind of stuff for a really long time, and it's hard to give it up. And I've had some people come in and they're like, I'm a liar. And I'm like, you're a liar. Yes, I lie about everything, and I'm just listening. And, that's sad to me that that's their identity. It's their behavior. Lying is a behavior. You need to change that. Do you understand how you change that? And so,
Right.
we go back in time. Where did that first lie happen? I can remember this one kid that was like, oh, I cursed at a party, and everyone said, oh, we're going to go tell your dad. And he was the perfect child. Well, the dad said, did you do this? And the boy said, no, I didn't, because he didn't want to get in trouble. And he got away with it. And it was his first boost of, wow, I can do this. And, as long as I'm acting innocent and sweet, I get away with it. And it was like the beginning of like the next 35 years of I get to do whatever I want. That's that entitlement piece, like I learned if I want something, I have to make it happen, or I have to be manipulative about a situation. And so, yeah, that would be one of those pieces that goes with, like, where does this behavior come from, and how does it continue? I guess some of the other things that when we're looking at, struggles, is a certified sex addiction therapist will come in and be able to see some of the things that need to be seen, and also not allow certain behaviors to continue because it gets called out. I had somebody today, and I just was like, well, but you're using I get what I want when I want it mentality, because he was like, he's been struggling for a while, and I just finally got the gumption to just say, okay, I'm just going to spell it out for you, dude. And that's what you need, is a therapist that'll spell it out, not going to pussyfoot around, is still going to be aware shame and guilt is at the source. But once they move past, they need a therapist that pushes them past shame and guilt, helps them learn to stay present for the partner, because that is like a whole other way of abusing or hurting the partner, is when they, the partner's upset, crying, angry, and they just turn into this like stone. They don't say anything because they feel like, I can't say anything. There's nothing I can say. She doesn't want to hear sorry. She doesn't want to hear this. She's, it's that mentality. So, yeah.
Yeah. It's hard. I mean, it's a lot of different layers. And I think what I want you to say to the listeners, to the women who are listening, to give them a realistic perspective of how long it's going to take for their partner to do this work, because you don't just go in and all of a sudden have that aha moment. There's peaks and valleys. There's 2 steps forward, there's 1 step back. And how would somebody realistically be able to assess that situation and know what they're up for?
So first, everybody's different in how they present and what they need. So if you've had a life of complex post-traumatic stress, if you are the person that acted out, you could be acting out because you have a lot of other things from your childhood taking space in your head and needs to be resolved in order for you to be able to work on some of the stuff that has to do with the damage you've caused in the relationship. So the person that I said, worked in AA, it took about 6 months to get everything back in a flow. She got healed. She felt empowered. She knew that she could ask for things. He had to be accountable. He used a tracker. He did everything that needed to happen, and he did it without being resentful. Because boy, you can tell when someone's just doing something because, well, that's what she's telling me to do. It's like, it doesn't work like that. The resentment is felt. There's a vibe going on between the two of you. And if you're just doing it to appease her, she feels it and she starts to feel unsafe again and resentful, because there's no way that you're going to continue to be sober if you can't do these things willingly. But then there's other people that I've seen for a couple of years, and their investment has to do with working on different pieces. Like first it was, here's the problem, and it might take 3 or 4 or 5 months or 6 months. It just depends on how long the person that acted out wants to stay entrenched in. I don't know what you're talking about. No, I don't do this. The lying is what I was bringing up before.
Right.
And then there's others that stay in a lot longer. But if you're staying in a lot longer, I kind of feel like there maybe something's not right. If you're still struggling with, continuous lying, etc., maybe there needed to be some kind of residential program or an intensive program where they go away for 2 weeks and they, get all of this. I just had someone go away for a 2-week program. So he got 33 hours worth of therapy. Like 33 hours of therapy concentrated is worth more than 33 hours. That's like 100+ hours of therapy all at one time, because you lose time every time you come in for your 1-hour session. 10 minutes of how are you doing, 10 minutes at the end, this is what I need you to do. It's like, no, if you do an intensive or you do a residential program or something like that, it's like, bam, you are hitting the problem, and then you're trying to move into like, how do we keep this sober living going? How do we keep this trust level growing? And that's when they start working on things like the intimacy pyramid, trust and honesty at the bottom, or truth and honesty at the bottom, empathy. Does your partner have empathy for you, or do they just look at you like you're the source of all their problems? They wouldn't have all these issues. Is there a sense of safety? Does he feel responsible for managing your safety? Is there, trust building? Is there vulnerability? Because if he can't come and tell you, I'm having some thoughts, or I picked up the phone or whatever it is, if he can't tell you what's going on in his head, then you're just sitting wondering, does he even think about these kind of things? That takes a lot for me to help men cross that line into, believe me, she wants to know that you even care about your thoughts and what she is having to think about or worry about. Like, it's a constant question in her head. And then the last pieces are connection, and then intimacy will just become a natural part of the whole process. So, but yeah, so it could be a couple of years. It could be more intensive work at the beginning. Some people are like, it takes me 3 months to get people to reduce some of their defensiveness, some of the anger, some of the emotion. I'd probably say 50% are like that. And then there's others that there's been a lot of damage and a lot of pain that was caused, and pain from both sides, because, now it's like, how do we fix this? I feel powerless. From his side, from her side, everybody's feeling like we're drowning here. And, we don't even know if there's a rope or a safety thing, a buoy or anything like that. We're just out there, there could be sharks around us, that for all we know. So,
right. And we don't know. And not all infidelity is caused by an addiction.
Right.
And yeah, say more about that, because I feel like there's some different considerations.
So infidelity can be just a one-time situation that, is causing just as much damage as multiple, infidelities, but it's not necessarily because their brain has built a pathway to say, keep cheating, keep cheating, keep cheating. It's more along the lines of they were doing something that gave them some kind of emotional or physical need met, but they weren't turning to the person they needed to, which is their partner. And if they rebuild the partnership and they go through and they do all that work I was telling you about on the other side, is this like blooming relationship that's better than it was before. Now we talk if we have problems. Now if I get snappy, ugly remarks, I can say, that was kind of snappy. What's that about? Instead of staying silent and thinking, is he going to cheat again if I even tell him, why are you talking to me that way? Like all of those defensiveness mechanisms go down and people are trying to be more authentic and genuine. That is ultimately where you're trying to get to at the end is, do I feel like there's all of those intimacy pyramid things that I talked about? Is there authenticity and genuine interaction? Because you can feel it. There's energy that crosses both sides. So
Right. And if it's not, you can feel that too. And one of the things that I think is really valuable is it's not always about just reconciliation. How can we each become better people? And, like you said earlier, maybe it's the relationship and maybe it's not. And really, either way is okay, but let's just all get healthy regardless.
Yeah. And especially if you have children, your children have to figure out what does it take to be in a healthy relationship. If the parents haven't been talking, have been distant, detached, they don't like each other, they see that. And they, now they're thinking, is that okay for me in a relationship? If I'm distant, detached from my partner, is that okay? Well, yeah, mom and dad did that. It's no biggie. But, you could have a really, a really healthy, connected relationship. And that's what you hope that your kids have is a healthy, connected relationship. I have a 20-year-old daughter and I have to just sit and be quiet, but I just watch and I, encourage her when she's saying, this just doesn't seem right. I'm like, well, if your gut instinct tells you that, go with that. Do investigations, ask more questions, but, don't hold on to what you think you need to ask.
I really appreciate that you said something too about like, do you like your partner? Because I think that's really important. We can say I love somebody, but I don't really like him. And I think it's different being like, I'm not really liking you right now because marriage is hard and we go through phases versus I really don't like this human being.
Yeah, I've seen that a couple of times, and you can just see that both parties kind of come to an understanding, and one will make the decision to move on, and then it becomes an issue of how do we get healthy for the next possible relationship we have.
Yeah, and that's powerful. I want to talk a little bit about the intimacy piece and rebuilding intimacy. I know a lot of women go into the hysterical bonding right afterwards. Some people are like, don't ever touch me ever again. But other people go into the hysterical bonding, which is, I want to have sex all the time. I want to be touched all the time. I want to talk about that. Where does that come from? How do we manage that? How do we find peace and balance around that?
So if your partner has gone off and gotten it from someone else or using pornography for it, and you had a happy, healthy sexual life prior to this acting out, there's just this like, I had somebody use the words, I am so parched and dehydrated. I need something, and you could have given it to me. You wanted that, and you didn't give it to me. That was the piece that some couples have. And when that returns, that intimacy level and the honesty, even if there's a little bit of safety, then sex starts happening really soon. And it's really, a great experience, and people start feeling like they've got some energy and they're moving. And then it might flip into, I don't want to have sex with this person anymore. And that's fine too. You're just going to be constantly figuring out where do I, what's stable for me? How do I get my footing here? And so they will back off from the sex piece because they need to actually do more work in the intimacy part, which is all those steps that, now that they realize, oh, he doesn't have empathy for me with regard to what I'm suffering, so let me back off because I need that. That's part of me feeling like he wants me.
Empathy is huge. And empathy, it does run along some gender lines too. I mean, again, I think women are trained to have more empathy and men have it trained out of them. And it's a real interesting learning curve to
Mm-hmm.
learn how to, I think, at first kind of fake empathy, but
Mm-hmm.
then to move into feeling, actually feeling it and then sustain that empathy.
Mm-hmm.
Can you share a little bit more about the work around empathy?
So with empathy, I'm going to use one of my favorite couples. They came in and they'd been working for maybe a year, and he was really not the empathetic partner, and kind of resentful about all the work he had to put in, all the money he had to put in. He's super intelligent, and so having to sit and talk to a therapist was kind of demeaning on some levels. But we grew a bond, and he felt like he could talk to me, and he did neurofeedback because I do brain training as well to calm the nervous system down. And one of the things that happened was that we did a rating, like 0 to 10, how empathetic do you think you are? And he had to look at her and he said, maybe 3. And she goes, I was thinking more like 2. And it was like, but they were on the same page about that. All the other ones that I mentioned, the vulnerability, the safety, the trust, all of that, that was up in the 70s, 80s, and they were kind of almost in agreement on all of those. And yet, the empathy piece was a big issue. And a lot of that had to do with the messages that he received in childhood, how men show up in a relationship. Some of it had to do with like the gender identity, gender shaping. If you're from certain cultures, there's certain ways to behave or ways to treat women, and a great there's a great video out there called The Man Box. I think his name is Tony. I can't remember what his last name is, but just look up Man Box on YouTube, and it's been really eye-opening for the men in my group to watch that, because it helps them understand that they've been dragging all of these messages from their young years. Like, I think the guy said, oh, you should be having sex from the age of 2. That's the way it is in the Bronx. People treat each other like that. And I was like, this is true, like, did you get some? That's phrases from the gender. Which base did you get to? Girls don't normally go and chit chat about, I let him get to base 3, but, to second base or whatever it is. It's
Right.
not yeah. So it becomes a positive thing if you can do these things. And it's like, well, now you're detaching healthy connection, relationship, etc., and becoming something else, which is part of what the gender in society, whatever is being presented to them. And then the sexuality piece too. It's like, well, how did your dad treat your mom? Oh, she's subservient, and and she needs to make sure she's at home a certain time. And if he wants to go to the bar, it's okay. And like, depending on, where you came from, whatever's going on, you get your messages on how to treat people with, in terms of sexuality as well. It could even be that, there's no hand holding, there's no kissing, or, there's a lot of kissing, and dad will embarrass mom in public and break boundaries, grabbing her butt or whatever. Like, those kinds of things are messages that these men get. And so, Dr. Minwala calls that the below the surface stuff. The above surface is your acting out stuff. I've used pornography, or I've cheated, and I think I deserve to be able to do this if I want to. It helps keep me from feeling guilty and ashamed. And then, breaking my word. But underneath are all these things that shaped this person to do some of these things that they did. Even infidelity, if they learned that if you're feeling hurt and someone isn't going to be able to meet your needs, go find the next person, and that could be something that was learned in childhood as well. So
Yeah. And so many of those beliefs never even rise to conscious level. It's just how we are. And that entitlement piece is huge. That entitlement piece is really huge. I know personally for myself, like my husband has a very traumatic background, very poverty stricken, and he's worked really hard. So for so long, he'd be like, I'm entitled to this. I deserve this. And it's like, yes, you do. And then at some point that crosses a whole other line. And it's like, and no, you're in a partnership.
Mm-hmm.
And I know a lot of men struggle with that. You know, they'll say, I work for this. And a lot of women are like, well, I know, and you should. But it's
Mm-hmm.
hard sometimes to identify where is the boundary and what is entitlement and what is self care.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think the main issue is, do you want a partner, or do you want just another person that's in the household, you know, with this transactional thing going back and forth. I give you the, the payment for the house, etc. And make sure the kids are okay. And like when it goes transactional with no love and no emotion and no, safety, security, and trust. When you get together in a relationship, that's what you look at your partner and say, I can give them that. And the same thing with this partner saying, I can give them that. It's not showing up and saying, well, can he give me this? Because if that's the way you're going to start, it ain't going to work out very well. But, being able to say safety, security, and trust, that's what you got in the beginning when you were a little baby. Your mom is holding you, looking in your eyes. The eye-to-eye contact is causing this oxytocin release, and that's that love hormone, right? And so you've got that going on, and here's this child saying, if I cry, they're gonna pat me, and if I'm wet, they're gonna change me. And that's the beginning of I can rely on people to meet my needs. I can be attached to you, and you can be attached to me. And if that's healthy and that's safe, then they continue to do that in the rest of their life. But there's some people that struggle because they didn't get this part, and they don't know how to show up like that in a relationship. So.
Yeah. And that's hard to learn. You can learn it, but that is hard to rewire. You were talking about the brain training, and I know that's very powerful. I'd love you to share about that, because I'm sure some listeners are like, I have no idea what that is.
Yeah, so I go out there and look for the things that are going to help reshape brain pathways. So if we have a brain that we're driving somewhere and we get there and we realize, I didn't even know that I didn't pay attention. How did I get here? That's that autopilot thing. Your brain knows what it's doing, and you could be, still monitoring everything and being safe, but you're on autopilot. And that's a brain pathway that's automatic. I get in the car, I go here to the school every single day. My brain knows what it needs to do, and the car, if it's a Tesla, knows what it's supposed to do, that kind of thing. But the other side of that is, at the brain training, I do neurofeedback training. That one, depending on placements and stuff, I have some people come in and they're getting the physical calming piece. So it's basically sensors that are reading brainwave activity, and the computer is trying to encourage or help shift and change. And when your brain starts thinking, I can shift and change, wow, it starts doing it all the time. So that's usually my first line for a lot of the men that I work with and the women, because they're super anxious, super on fight or flight, and they need something to calm themselves down. And so that's usually my first line of, intervention. After, here's what's going on, here's your plan of action. Look, this is how we assess this. This is, the way forward, how this should look. Get all the educational stuff, and then start something like brain training or neurofeedback. Neurofeedback started in the addictions field in the 70s with alcohol addiction centers. They were trying to increase alpha theta brain waves that are relaxing, but also creative. And so all of that was going on. Well, it's just continued to evolve, and it's incredible. If you have anxiety, if you have ADHD, if you've got trauma, if you have like emotional overwhelm, like there's just a variety of based on placements, I can impact what's going on sometimes with the brain responding to things. So I like that. And then as a brain hacker, I really believe in learning to get inside your body. Yeah. And everybody needs to learn something about mindfulness, deep breathing exercises, mindful walking, where you're paying attention to everything that you're noticing around, instead of thinking about, I wonder what he's doing, and I wonder where he's at, and let me look at my life 360. That just gets draining when you're having to feel like you're micromanaging everything about this partner. Like, did you want another child? No, but that's the only thing that makes you feel safe in the moment. But if you turn around and put that energy into yourself, and like I said, if you grow past that into your own, they notice that and they start shifting and changing. Those things are still important for you in the very beginning, the Life 360, the accountability app for pornography, because there's some apps you can put on phones and computers to get notification on porn use, or sexting, texting kinds of stuff. So yeah, so that's where I'm at.
Yeah, yeah. And it's hard. I appreciate that you called out betrayal trauma is PTSD. It's trauma. And I think sometimes that's even hard to acknowledge because we're like, no, I can figure this out. I'm a strong, capable woman, blah, blah, blah. Yes, and you can be a strong, capable woman, and you can be traumatized, and you can be suffering from betrayal trauma, and you can need help, and it's all the different things. And yes, early on, I did want to monitor, and I felt safer monitoring, but no, I didn't want to monitor the rest of my life. That's not. So learning how to soothe myself was huge.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think for a lot of women, when they're able to redirect away from those things eventually, their partner has to be on board, though. They need to be showing. I go to meetings, I do readings, I open up about my thoughts and feelings. If they're still not telling you why they're sitting there sullen about something, instead of using you as a partner to help co-regulate, that's one of those things that's a phrase that you're going to hear. Emotional regulation, can you calm yourself down from fight or flight, or bring yourself up from freeze? And co-regulation is, can you and your partner, provide assistance and support to each other to help each other balance out your moods? So
Yeah, yeah. And that co-regulation piece is huge. Really huge. I think especially for people who have never done it before. I know just for me personally, my girlfriends and I, my parents, like we all co-regulated. And the way my husband was raised, it's you figure it out for yourself. And it felt very vulnerable. You talked about that vulnerability piece. It feels very vulnerable for him to engage in that.
it's scary. I mean, you talk about worst fears. If you go back, you can probably pinpoint that point where they like stepped over the edge of, this isn't just, I'm a little scared child. It's I'm a terrified child because nobody's showing up or giving guidance, or maybe other people are showing up and causing more trauma. And that's why the sex addiction field is largely focused a lot of times on trauma. Probably 80% of the time or more, there's a need for some kind of trauma work.
Oh, absolutely. Now, I'm sure there's listeners thinking, well, I don't know if my partner is really addicted or not. How do you know when it's truly an addiction versus a bad habit? Where is that line?
So the line is, if your partner's not happy about it, that's a line. Especially if you're not able to take part in the necessary parts of a relationship, like having a sex life and being able to perform, effectively if you need to, or being able to even be present with each other. If you have to just do something on autopilot without being aware of who you're with, that's the benefit of a sexologist. That's why I went and got that additional certification, is because I needed to be able to help guide and encourage a reconnection on that level, because it's just not an automatic thing. Things have to be talked about. I mean, this whole thing started out of, misguided or misdirected energies into other sexual outlets. So, we're going to have open communication and, ask questions. And so, yeah, I have people that are like, did she just ask me that? And it's kind of like, but then they're relieved because they're like, this is a conversation I really wanted to have. I just didn't know how to start it. And since I have that experience and I know where people get stuck, I know where to look and say, let me ask this one question to unstick everything else that needs to be, unstuck. So.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And then what about multiple addictions? Why do the multiple addictions tend to stack in there?
Because it's So you said, how does this turn into, what's the criteria for addiction? If you're overindulging in something because it's helping self-soothe you, or you're seeking a dopamine hit and you need that constant dopamine pleasure hit, that could be signs of an addiction. There's a lot of, free things online to just, do I have an addiction kind of thing? But my husband had multiple addictions, right? And, talk about the ultimate cover up. Like, your wife is a therapist and, has worked in the addictions field, and you were able to hide lots of stuff. So if you feel like, how could I have not known that? Believe me, I've said the same thing, and several of my therapist friends have said, how could I have not known that? But, the goal is, like, how do you move past that? It doesn't matter, like, why didn't you know? I mean, it does matter. Your body helped you do that. Your body helped you block out things that you didn't want to see. Your body and your brain, kind of helped readjust the story. You didn't want to know that all these secrets were there, because that meant that your partner that you trusted and loved was hurting you. I didn't want to think my husband was doing anything. So the stacking has to do with, I need things to help me self-soothe. And that it's over the line if you have legal problems, if you have relationship problems, if you can't show up as a parent because you have to, skip all the practices your kids have. All the other dads show up, but not you, because you need to go and have time acting out, or you need to have sexting on your phone. Open up 5 different dating apps, like things like that. When it crosses the line and affects other parts of your life, it's probably a problem.
Mm-hmm. I also really appreciate that you said, like, why didn't you know? Because same thing, I'd sometimes think, why didn't I know? And I know when I work with people, they'll say that too. And I really am a firm believer that it comes out when you're ready to have it come out, when you are psychologically safe enough within yourself, when you are resourced enough, it will come out. And I don't think there's anything like magical or better having something come out too soon, because I think if I would have found out too soon, it would have been much more catastrophic than when I did find out.
Yeah, your brain will actually let you do the things it needs you to do when it feels like this is a space where you can handle it. Now sometimes things come tumbling out because of the partner's behavior. But for the most part, if you've been walking past the same thing over and over and just not seeing it, it's because that's what your brain is saying it needs and what it's feeling. And it'll eventually restabilize. So that's the main thing is, am I going to get my mind back? I lost my mind. Am I going to get my mind back? And the answer is yes. And why didn't you know? It's a protection. The self-protection is in there, self-preservation. Your brain shuts down what it doesn't want to see. It's like, it's like men that go to war. They learn to stop thinking about the danger and just focus on, what do I need to do here?
Yeah.
And if you're a mom, you have like 5 kids in all kinds of sports and you work, it's survival. What do I have to do here to make it through the day?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's interesting. I know for me, especially, to look back and to see where I was in survival mode when I didn't realize I was in survival mode at the time.
Yeah. I just want to get to the surface, right? It's like you've been pushed under and you're just like, I'm looking for some air. Anybody got some air? Because my partner's not giving it to me. And that's when you have to really keep on top of who is your support system? Are you doing the basics of taking care of yourself? If you're not eating well, not exercising, not sleeping, that's like level 1 of,
Right.
101 of taking care of yourself, because you're just not going to show up as strong as you need to show up if you don't take care of those 3 basic areas.
I love the phrase support system. I wrote that down because we were talking about safety, security, and trust. And I think sometimes people get lost over what that means. Well, I'm safe enough. There's a roof over my head. I'm not getting hit. I'm just getting emotionally yelled at.
Yeah.
Like people, safe, secure, and trust, that's sometimes hard. And support system. And while it's also fair that we can have different definitions for ourselves, also really being able to step back and be like, no, I am safe and I deserve safety. And being yelled at, being demeaned, being belittled, that isn't safe either. And I do deserve more than that.
Yeah, I think that's why community for me is very important. I had to set up a women's support group and a men's support group for my practice because I had a woman come in and say, great, he's got therapy and he's unburdened. What about me? I'm the one in pain. I'm the one that has to wake up every day with crying, and I still have to get the baby and the kids to school. And like, who's there for me, Cheryl? And I would just be like, okay, I'll take it, challenge accepted. And so I formed, I started seeing people individually for the betrayal trauma piece. And then I started working on some of the couple piece as a system. And it really helped though for women to be able to have a space to not feel ashamed, to not feel guilty, to not feel, because you have people coming up and saying, just give him another chance, girl. It's okay.
Right.
Or leave that rat. We need to, you need to stand up for yourself. And it's like, if you really want to help your girlfriend out when she's saying this has happened to me, you just be there and listen. And, not give opinion, not say what she should or shouldn't do, because that actually causes more pain for them, because now they don't have you to turn to. Not only do they not have their partner, now they don't have their bestie to turn to.
Yeah, such good advice. Good advice. And I know it's hard. It's hard to keep your mouth shut as the best friend sometime, but yes, how can you support? How can you be supported? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, where can people learn more about you and your work and get in touch with you?
Sure. They can reach out to my website. It's CherylCamarillo.com. You can find me on YouTube, on Instagram, on TikTok at Sharing with Cheryl, Sharing with Cheryl. And then also I started putting a lot of statements on there, because I really get random thoughts and I'm like, this is a good place to just drop this stuff until I can make videos. So, hopefully there'll be a lot more videos coming out. I've, gotten some support in that area, but the YouTube videos will be coming out. A lot of the stuff that we've been talking about, Dr. Minwala's stuff about entitlement, behavioral acting out and integrity. I'll be doing a lot more videos online on YouTube. So at Sharing with Cheryl, and hope that y'all subscribe and jump on there. But the website, if you go on there, there's 3 free webinars for women on betrayal trauma.
Oh, nice.
And so you just fill in saying I want that, and you'll be put on a list, and they'll start sending you emails with 3 different webinars. One is just what is betrayal trauma and sex addiction, and one is on what are the treatment options, so that you have a place to say, do I do residential? Do I need a couples therapist who specializes? Yeah. And then the third one is the ultimate self-care. Like, what are you going to do? Because if you don't stay strong, ain't nobody going to survive this. So.
Exactly. Good. Thank you. And those will be very useful resources, because you're right. We have to stay strong. Mm-hmm. And it is overwhelming. And I don't want to say there's a lot of bad therapists out there, but there's a lot of people who don't specialize in this and sometimes end up doing more harm than good, as you alluded to earlier. So thank you. Yeah. Thank you for the work that you do.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you hearing this information and sending it out, because there's so many people so lonely and desperate, thirsty for information. And I think this really helps, helps with the start of mending and healing. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you. Listeners, reach out, check out some of these webinars. Reach out to either one of us if you have a question. We will get you sent in the right direction. Have an amazing week. And as usual, always remember to flaunt exactly who you are, because who you are is always more than enough.
Tune in next time to Flaunt, find your sparkle, and create a life you love after infidelity or betrayal with Lora Cheadle every Wednesday at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on syndicated Dream Vision 7 Radio Network. Uncover the truth of what's possible for you on the other side of betrayal and develop the skills and strategies necessary to embrace the future and flourish today. Download your free Betrayal Recovery Toolkit at betrayalrecoveryguide.com.